Hi, my name is Matthias and welcome to a new tutorial. I hope you all had a great start into the new year, and I wanted to thank you all for your great support in the last and for this channel first year. Subscribing, liking and commenting are crucial for the success of videos and the whole channel. So please, if you like what I'm doing, hit the buttons and help to support my work. Let's go on subject. Frequency splitting is perhaps the most important splitting method, especially for electronic music. Apart from its advantages when it comes to mixing, for example in the form of multiband compression, there's a huge creative potential, especially when we have a plugin as well designed as ImageLine's relatively new frequency splitter. It simply makes it easy to use a whole bunch of mixing and creative sound design techniques in a single and easy to use GUI. So let's have a deeper look. The GUI is scalable, which makes it really comfortable to work with. The controls are grouped into 3 parts, which are the heart of the more advanced possible uses. Knowing the exact working methods of these sections is the key to success when using this plugin. The actual idea behind it is quite simple and is done in the first section, the crossover. Take the incoming audio signal and split it into 2 or 3 bands with different filter slopes or steepnesses from gentle 6 dB per octave up to surgical 96 dB to give each split its own controls for further manipulation. For most mixing tasks, you will most likely use the 24 dB filters. But let rules never stop you to experiment with different filter slopes for creative uses. In 2 bands mode, we adjust the crossover point with, I call it here the red knob. The green knob is grayed out. Nevertheless, it is still active. I can freely move the crossover point with my red knob, but when I reach the set value of the green knob, the crossover point of the filter stops, even if I can move the knob even further. This behavior can be handy if you want to limit the movement of the crossover without having always to look exactly what you're doing. So for example, if you decide the crossover may never go above 500 Hz, you can set the green knob accordingly, and however you move the red one from this moment, the crossover can just be set below these 500 Hz. And even with the red knob turned fully clockwise, the crossover is pinned there. To prevent this auto-limiting, set the green knob fully to the right. Or simply link the 2 knobs by click on the chain icon here. The crossover point can now be set from the lowest 30 Hz to the full 16 kHz, which are the minimum and maximum values for the filters in the frequency splitter. In the 3-band modes though, the green knob becomes active as well. Setting the red and green knob to their values sets automatically the range of the midband, as no gaps in between are allowed. The 3 bands cover always the whole available frequency range. After setting the crossover points, we are able to manipulate the bands individually. In the main out tab, we've got a couple of controls, color-coded for identifying the controls for the corresponding bands. The knobs let me manipulate the output volume of the individual bands. So basically we have a simple 3-band EQ. Low and high band are shelving filters with a range of -infinity up to +18 dB, while the midband acts like a peak filter set to a very broad range. Especially here, it's worth to try out different crossover slopes, as a normal EQ would be rather used with 6 dB per octave than 24 dB or higher. But again, feel free to choose whatever sounds good to you, as well as setting different slopes for both. We can hover as well over the lines in the display, where little handles appear to set the volume without the knobs. It feels really nice with a great precision, and like the knobs, the handle snaps a little bit to the 0 line to be able to reset the volume without any hassle. Left-click the buttons below, mute the corresponding band. Right-click solos the band. So muting the low band gives me a high-pass filter on the low band, which I can adjust with the crossover knob. Muting the high band gives me a low-pass filter with the same behavior. Muting the mid-band gives me a very broad notch filter, great for phaser-like effects. All these modes leave me still with a 3-band EQ. Other, the right-click options. Soloing the low band gives me a single low pass. Soloing the high band, a single high pass. Soloing the mid-band, just a band pass. Especially here are the settings of the crossover points crucial, and the link button comes in very handy, depending what you're aiming for. I have to say I'm always amazed how many possibilities this plugin provides with just these few controls. They really pushed it to the max. In the corner we got 2 additional buttons to show or hide the crossover filters, respectively the out of crossovers and volume settings resulting EQ curve. Beside all the possible filter action and all of its creative purposes, which can of course be automated or modulated, there is one very important use case for this new plugin. When doing more advanced sidechain ducking with native plugins and using the P controller, envelope or keyboard controller as trigger source, many people used in the past the Fruity Balance plugin for automating its volume. As sidechain pumping is a very noticeable effect, it can be a bit annoying on sources which shall not interfere with the kick, but sounding a bit silly when being ducked completely, like pads, leads or effect sounds. Setting the frequency splitter to 2 bands and automating the volume knob of the low band instead can lead to a much more unhearable effect. Ducking away all frequencies which are important for the kick, but without destroying the whole rest of the sound. Last but not least, we have perhaps the most interesting tab of this plugin, the Sends. Even if both tabs look very similar, the difference between the main out and the Sends tab is the very most point to understand of this whole device. While the main out is designed to work with this device only, the Sends section is more meant to work outside this plugin. At the moment, I have set up this plugin as a normal insert, and while changing values on the main out reflecting immediately inhearable results, I can turn the knobs in the Send section without changing anything. Not even the graphics are changing after adjusting the knobs. Only when I activate the bands and EQ curve on the Sense, I get a little hint what's going on. I have basically two separate EQ engines running in the same plugin. They are sharing the same filter settings, but volume and activity states are independent from each other, which to my knowledge no other plugin on the whole market offers, neither native of any other DAW nor a third-party plugin. Being able to automate everything inside the plugin, even in linear phase mode, reduces the list of competitors already to one or two expensive plugins. But having two parallel engines inside makes the frequency splitter outstanding and unique against everything else and offers a whole new universe of creative possibilities. So big respect to the creator of this idea. But how does this work? Using the device as a normal insert in the mixer, we can send these single bands to any other mixer channel we like. Just create a sidechain connection to other mixer tracks, name them for example band 1, 2 and 3, and they get available in the drop-down list of the Send section. The main out sends further its signal as normal and as a whole and single result, while at the same time in parallel the other mixer tracks receive just the splitted signals. The low band, the mid band and the high band. All changes I do in the main out section reflect not on the other channels, but just on the original channel itself. And all changes I do in the Send section just change the other tracks, but not the signal on the original track. These are separate routings and outputs. On the Send tracks, I can now start to treat the single band with any other plugin. Reverb on the lows is never a good idea, so I send just the mid and the high band to my reverb channel. Distortion on the low band is often very extreme as well, so to keep my signal clean, I do it just on the mid band. Perhaps a bit gating for some movement just here as well. Or set up your own multiband compressor out of your favorite plugins, which turned out to be very well working on this specific frequency region. An LA2A style on the lows, as here rapid movements are not what I wish. An 11T76 style on the highs for extreme snappiness and catching shorter peaks, and perhaps some SSL style on the mids. You get the idea. Let your creativity run wild. If you like to have the main output running for using different effects in parallel to the individual bands, just place the plugins for the main out behind. The sidechain connections of the frequency splitter are automatically pre-fader. Means they are sent out directly behind the plugin before it hits the next slot. Again, very nice. Big respect for thinking of all these little details. This makes working with the plugin in the mixer so much easier. To hear just the single bands but not the main output anymore, in the plugin in the main out section you can turn down all the knobs or just mute all bands. Alternatively, in the mixer, you can just mute the original track or pull down its fader. But please be always aware that for creative purposes you can do everything in between too. up to turning a sidechain into a send and sending some signal of the main section into a single band's mixer track for having it processed with the plugins on this track additionally. There are many ways to use these routing options. In Patcher, we have to work with the output section of the right-click menu, activating 1 to 3 sends depending on your needs, and select them in the send section. The top node represents the main output of the plugin. And the following, in my example band 1 to 3. Insert plugins for the individual outputs to your liking, as we did in the mixer method. Mute or delete the connection from the main output if you want to hear just the single bands. Or place its own plugins into the connection to have it running in parallel to the single bands, but sounding different. Advanced layering with just one sound source. I leave the rest to your imagination. On the bottom, we've got the controls for setting the band splitting into linear phase mode, which can be beneficial when working on complex material which may not be changed in phase anymore, like for mastering purposes. Click the LED to turn linear phase mode on or off. Set the precision. This setting relates just to the precision of the low band, respectively to the slope of the low band when it's being moved towards the left. Setting this mode higher results in having a more accurate crossover slope of the low band when going into very low regions. But you pay the price by having higher latencies. It's set to medium by default as a compromise between latency and precision. The resulting latency of the plugin ranges at a sample rate of 44.1 kHz from gentle more or less 9 milliseconds to nearly 280 milliseconds on the highest setting. Again, this will just and perhaps improve your sound when moving the low band far to the left. At more suitable ranges, like the by default set 200 Hz, you will probably not hear any difference between the lowest and highest setting. So it depends on the individual situation, means depending on the source material and the cutoff frequency of the low band, which precision to choose. The speed knob determines how fast you can automate controls in linear phase mode. To the left allows you to do faster automation changes than having it set to the right. By default it is set to the left, but according to the manual this costs more CPU. Decide in the current situation how much is actually necessary. Next, we have the buttons for what we want to see in the analyzer. I have set here different volumes in the main and send sections for the individual bands, so watch the change in the displayed frequency spectrum when I set different states. We can choose from off to the pure input, the main out, or the send output. Finally, there's the drop-down menu we know already from other plugins for setting the histogram and heat map. There you have it. A really great and useful device making frequency splitting easy to handle but very powerful. From simple EQing over advanced sidechaining up to the craziest multiband operations, this device is always your best friend. Have a great time, stay tuned, and thank you for watching.